I want to see something different. Like, we value getting done. Okay, great. That's a value that I can get behind because I believe in that too. So what do you value? I make a lot of business decisions, and content that I put out there has to align with my values. If it doesn't align with your values, to your point, you're not being authentic. And so another thing you could look at as you're evaluating a franchise brand to potentially invest in, take a peek under the hood at what their careers page looks like. How are they talking to the people that they're going to hire? What are the words they're using there as well? And sometimes they'll list values. For me, it's a red flag if they're listing a value like honesty, integrity, because I'm like, that's table stakes. Everybody, I hope, is doing that in business. I want to see something different. Like, we value getting done. Okay, great. That's a value that I can get behind because I believe in that too. Don't just go for the buzzwords in that. Like, back to authenticity. Like, if you're saying that you value honesty, well, I sure as hell hope so, because that's why are we even having this conversation if you don't? So kind of look at that too as another place to take a peek under the hood.
So marketing is the number one skill set that I believe entrepreneurs need to first master to build a successful business. And today I got to sit down with Brooke, who is an expert in the marketing industry. She's worked with brands like Disney, Toro, GE, Sonic, and Liberty Tax. So in this episode, we dive into some really, really fascinating marketing secrets that her clients pay big bucks for. And she also shared her wisdom from going from employee to entrepreneur herself and what you need to know about making the leap. So let's jump in. All right. Well, welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. Brooke, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited for our conversation. Marketing has become one of my favorite topics where, it wasn't really before. But you've worked with some, amazing brands and been the brains behind some pretty powerful marketing. But, for most people, marketing's just like this generic word that it's like a buzzword that really doesn't mean much to them. So what is marketing in your eyes, and why can it mean the difference between success and failure in business?
That was a great question. It's hard to take it into one sentence, but I'm going to try. And I feel like marketing is the ability to craft a great narrative or a great story, either visually or through text, that drives people to action. So ultimately, that's what we want to do as marketers, right? We want someone to take action, whether it's buy our product, buy our service, hire us, and the ability to connect with people at a level that incites that type of action really needs to be at a level where they feel like they can relate to it. And I feel like storytelling is the best way to do that. So.
Storytelling. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It's interesting that I've never really considered myself as a marketer. I was always like, I feel like I naturally love operations. Like, I think in another life I might have been, an engineer. And it's funny that through content and telling my story online, people are like, "Oh, you're such a great marketer." And it took a while, after like a year or a year and a half of hearing that, to start to actually claim that as an identity. And as you know, identity is, really, really, really powerful. So just to piggyback on that question, you're talking about storytelling. Why is storytelling so important?
Well, I think it's such a great way for people to dive in. If you think about podcasts, for example, I feel like the first podcast I ever listened to was Serial. And that was a story. So every episode I was hooked and I just kept listening to it. And it was, to me, different than an audiobook. And I can't really put my finger as to why, but podcasting is just a different form of storytelling, in my opinion. I love what you do on your podcast. You bring people on, you tell stories yourself. And so for you to start claiming that identity and accepting that, I'm very happy for you, because it's relatable. It's what people want. Stories, they're easier to remember than facts and data. It's something that they're like, oh yeah, I heard this story one time. They'll repeat it much easier than they can repeat a statistic or something that they've read from an article.
Yeah, it's so true. And you've done a great job on your social media starting to really tell a story, build a brand, posting a lot of content. And I was just having a conversation with someone recently about, why I don't think that people in franchising, whether they're franchisees and actual franchise owners or franchisors, I think a lot of them aren't really creating compelling content or like sharing their journey.
Mhm.
Like why do you think that is, and what are they missing out on?
Yeah. So, from a perhaps a franchisor perspective, first and foremost, I think the relatable story there is, why did you decide to go into business for yourself and invest in a franchise? And what were the struggles? Everyone can relate to a struggle. And I recently had a post about how entrepreneurship is difficult. And I don't like seeing all these posts where everybody says, oh, I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and I take an ice bath and I do this, this, and this, because to me that's not relatable. What people want is, how did you struggle and how did you triumph? And everyone loves a good story about that. And so I think franchisors have the ability to say, I quit my job at, my 9 to 5 corporate job and got into this because I wanted a better life for myself. There's a story there that's relatable. And from a franchisee perspective as well, why did you, invest in this particular franchise, and why did you decide to go into business for yourself and create a different lifestyle for your family? And what were the struggles that helped you triumph? Why did you pick that particular brand? There's a lot. You had a post recently about, different brands and why celebrities are aligning themselves with them. And I shot back and said, well, what are, some of these, are they aligning with their values, or is it just the numbers that was
The
compelling to them?
paycheck.
Right. Right. And that's a story in itself too. And that's not one to discount, but I think there's deeper stories about, they aligned with the mission or the values, and that's why they chose that brand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good point. We have someone who went through our system. He bought a home inspection franchise, and it's funny because he used to be a wildland firefighter
Okay.
and hated social media, would make fun of his buddies for being on TikTok. And the franchisor suggested that he started making content. And so he's starting to develop a following, sharing, like he's up in crawl in attics,
Hmm.
taking videos, posting them on TikTok, and he said he's getting customers from it, which is fascinating. And so, like, really just sharing behind the scenes, it's
Hmm.
something so simple even at the franchisee level,
Hmm.
can really make a difference.
Absolutely. Those types of behind the scenes are so intriguing to people because it's just something that they don't see every day. And so that's probably why he's getting such a great response from it. I worked for a home services franchisor, and one of the things that we encouraged was just a lot of the like doing for the franchisees to do stories or TikToks of them applying the garage floor coating, because it was almost, there's a subreddit called Oddly Satisfying, where you can watch like people power washing their decks, or I mean, even people like like when you vacuum and there's the lines in the carpet, people find that oddly satisfying. So we thought, well, it is oddly satisfying to watch us apply this garage floor coating. So we encourage the franchisees to create videos like that. So again, it's a storytelling aspect that's really relatable.
It would probably be embarrassing to share how many hours of car detailing videos I have watched on YouTube.
See, you find that oddly satisfying.
I definitely do, and I'm slightly OCD, so I'm like, oh, this is great. If only my car was that clean.
Yeah.
So
And
I
it's
want,
relatable for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, still relatable. Yeah, I need to
Mhm.
get my car detailed right now. Um, So it's interesting because you have a background in branding and helping and storytelling, and so to me, what's interesting because we have kind of a diverse crowd who watches the podcast. We have people that are franchise buyers, we have people that are franchisees, we have franchisors, and so I thought what's interesting to me is really looking at brands of franchisors and really like how that can play a part in the the overall brand success or lack of it, if they don't do a good job in actually creating that brand or the elements of a brand. So like why do you think that's important in a franchise buyer's process to evaluate the franchisor's brand?
That's a great question. And I love this question for various reasons. I think I can take it in a couple different directions, but I think back to discovery days where I was in the room with potential franchisees coming in to vet our brand. And one of my favorite things to talk about was the brand and how we developed it. And when you develop a brand, you think very strategically and you take a lot of time to outline what is our voice, what is our tone, how are we going to speak to customers. And excuse me, because that's so deliberate, you see that woven throughout all the messaging. So as a potential buyer, I would encourage you to go look and see what the message is out in the marketplace. What are people saying? Put yourself through the process. So if it's a service industry, call and make an appointment and see what are they actually saying on the phone, or what does the email say when it comes back to you after you've booked an appointment, and see if you can pick up on those little nuances of their voice and their tone, because that's going to be indicative of how they're going to ask you to speak to the customers if you become a franchisee. And does that align with what you want? Um, a little inside baseball with Hello Garage, the brand that I worked for, we wanted to be playful, but not silly. So there's a difference there. And so we wanted to have fun with our messaging and encouraged our franchisees that, hey, we're going to call our floor coatings ice cream colors, or excuse me, ice cream flavors instead of like a natural color, because that's memorable for somebody. So does that resonate with you? Are you willing to have fun with that? Are you willing to have fun on the sales calls with consumers and say, hey, do you want to buy chocolate chip or do you want to buy, Rocky Road? And just kind of living out that brand. So as a franchisee, in summary, ask to see if you could get a peek under the hood at their brand guidelines and see what their voice and tone is, because that will tell you a lot about what they're going to ask you to carry through as a brand ambassador for them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I've never even thought about asking that. We have like a scorecard spreadsheet that we tell some of the folks that use our system to actually, that's one of the categories, is to rate the brand
Mm-hmm.
and the leadership team, and that's a part of their decision making process, because different brands are going to make you feel a different way. I know
Mm-hmm.
that when my wife and I were buying into the juice and smoothie space, there were certain brands that they felt cheesy to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm looking at the logo and the way they do their graphics and marketing, it felt cheesy or it felt cheap, and there may be some other brands that they position themselves as like the premier, in the space, or more modern, etc. And I think it's so important for people to figure out what is, I guess, the most authentic to them, right? And I kind of want to pivot. I'm going to throw a curveball a little bit at you here, but which is talking about a little bit about authenticity, because I know it's something that you talk about a lot, right? Which is like being authentic. So how do you align like a brand with being authentic, whether you're at the franchisee level or the franchisor level? But how do you infuse yourself into it so that you can attract like your tribe?
So how can the franchisor do that, or how can an individual do that?
I think either way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about franchisor first.
Sure. So I think it goes back to your purpose as a business. So, what is your purpose? And people confuse purpose and mission. So, purpose is really something that believe in. And I think about a pet transportation company that I work for. Our purpose is to and make sure that pet owners have a safe and reliable service for their pets. That's it. And so you have to think about what is the brand's purpose, And then are you making sure that that is authentically being communicated at every touch point? So
Mm.
not just in your marketing communications, but how are your sales people going out in the marketplace? How are they interacting with your customers? And then if you're a home services industry, perhaps how are the installers interacting? And so another purpose that I really think about and hang my hat on is, again, one that I worked for, where we wanted to redefine what it meant to work with a home services contractor. So when I say home services contractor, you probably think of somebody that's not going to show up on time. They maybe their vehicle, back to your OCD, their vehicle might not be clean. They may traipse mud through your home. But how can we, as a franchisor, our purpose being we're going to redefine what that means to work with a contractor, make sure that happens at every touch point of the customer journey. And so, really asking about the purpose and less about the mission is another thing that I think can really is a litmus test for both internal and external people to see how authentic you're being. A question I like to ask, and I'm flipping it back on you, but flipping it to what a franchisee could ask again is ask the franchisor during Discovery Day, would you be your own customer? Or ask the validators, would you be your own customer? And have them think about all of the steps of the process that they are executing. And yeah, I guess I would buy from myself. I mean, it's a very telling question, and it can reveal a lot.
Yeah, wow, so interesting point there, which is, what I came up with this kind of methodology that I share, which is called the profitable franchise formula. It's like a framework in selecting a franchise, and one of them is having a belief in the franchise. So instead of passion, because a lot of people say, okay, choose something you're passionate about, but in my opinion, passion is can be surface level, because like what you're passionate about today, you may not be passionate about like a month from now. Like your passion can shift, but generally speaking, our beliefs and convictions don't change often. And so we had a guy that was looking at a couple of different home services brands in the remodeling space. And one of them was one of the brands where I don't want to call it cookie cutter, but it's like, they do like those same day or 2 day kind of remodels where they have kind of templates and where they do the remodel. And that was kind of being presented as the sexier option because it's so simple, blah, 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 blah. And so I asked him, and then he was looking at this other concept where it was going to be much more complicated to run the business. They do full service remodels. And I said, well, which one would you prefer as the customer? And he's like the full service. And I'm like, that's the one you go with then. Because whatever you believe in the most is going to give you the highest chance of success. There are other people that are like, yeah, no, I'd want the quick one. I don't want to waste all my time doing all that stuff. Probably be me. Um, but so isn't that interesting? I mean, I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah. And it goes back to something I said to you yesterday, like attracts like. And so if that is your, what you believe in, you want something quick and that's how you want to operate your business, then that's what you should go and do, because like you said, you believe in that and you're going to be more successful because you're going to put your heart and soul into something you believe in. But if there's even just a shred of doubt, or if something is not aligning, back to your authenticity point, it means it's not authentic to you. And how are you going to be able to get behind something that you don't feel passion, or you don't believe in, or is not coming across authentic? Because if you're being asked to carry that brand in your market and you don't feel great about it, you're not going to do a good job. And it's just not going to be a win-win for anybody. You're not going to feel great, and the franchisor is not going to feel great because you didn't carry the brand forward like they wanted you to.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think, to me, this whole idea of brand and authenticity is so interesting. It's something I've thought about a lot lately in terms of just how me and my team create content. And there was a point where I realized I'm like, oh, my videos, I'm kind of coming across as like this really nice, laid back guy. And I'm like, that's not me. Like maybe people would consider me to be nice. A lot of people say relatable when they reach out, like people that watch the content. I'm like, okay, I'm good with relatable, but I'm super intense. Like I'm a hard ass about things. And I started to realize, I'm like, I don't think some of my content is representing who I actually am as an, individual. And I would imagine that there's franchisors that are out there like that, that they're presenting themselves to be X,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're actually not. And then franchisees maybe get in the system and they're like, oh crap, I made a mistake.
Right. And that comes down to values, honestly. So, what do you value? And I make a lot of business decisions, and the content that I put out there has to align with my values. If it doesn't align with your values, you're, to your point, you're not being authentic. And so, another thing you could look at as you're evaluating a franchise brand to potentially invest in, take a peek under the hood at what their careers page looks like. How are they talking to the people that they're going to hire? What are the words they're using there as well? And sometimes they'll list values.
Mm.
And for me, it's a red flag if they're listing a value like honesty, integrity, because I'm like, that's table stakes. Everybody, I hope, is doing that in business. Like, I want to see something different. Like, we value getting shit done. Okay, great. That's a value that I can get behind because I believe in that too. And so don't just go for the buzzwords in that. Like, is this, again, back to authenticity. Like, if you're saying that you value honesty, well, I sure as hell hope so, because that's, why are we even having this conversation if you don't? So kind of look at that too. I think that will, is another place to take a peek under the hood.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. It's like the subtleties, right? You learn a lot in the subtleties. And
Hmm.
I think it's easy to not pay attention to some of those subtleties. Um, so what I think is interesting is that, you are now in the entrepreneur space yourself, right?
Hmm.
You went from, working for these franchisors as, an employee, and then now shifting to creating your own brand, your own business. So, one, what was that moment like when you left your last employer and decided that I'm going to go do my own thing?
Yeah. Well, that's a great story. And you could probably go through my LinkedIn and find out who I'm talking about here in this story. But I will say it was not a calculated decision. I did not sit down one day and say, I'm going to leave corporate on this day and I'm going to start my own business. It was, and in fact, I have had several people tell me for years, you should start your own business. And I would just say, no, 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 no. I like what I'm doing. I like the stability. And, imposter syndrome would creep in and I would think I couldn't do it. So I would just keep doing what I was doing until I was in a situation where I was so uncomfortable with the environment that I knew that I had to get out. And it was a situation where I thought, I don't have a backup plan right now. And I'm going to resign and I will see what happens. And when I resigned, the CEO said, well, oh my gosh, I need you to keep doing XYZ. And he goes, would you consider being a contractor, consulting with us to finish out these projects? One of them was a franchise development project. And I said, sure. And all of a sudden it just dawned on me. I was like, did I just get my first client? And so it just kind of happened that way. And I started to tell more and more people I was going out on my own, and things just kind of started to happen. And so my story might not be as cookie cutter as others, where they say, damn the man, I'm leaving corporate and I'm going out on my own. It was more, it kind of, the universe kind of brought it to me. But I will say it has been a roller coaster. It, as you know, and I'm sure everybody that's listening to this can relate to the roller coaster of entrepreneurship.
Oh, it is a roller coaster. And my suggestion is do not jump off in the middle of the ride.
Yeah. That is great. I've wanted to. Believe me, I think last week I wrote a post that you probably could garner that I was contemplating jumping off.
Yeah. It's interesting because at some point, talking about brand and messaging more, I've realized that a lot of the content we were making, or I guess I was making, was around like, oh, entrepreneur, you should become an entrepreneur, and kind of glamorizing it. And I think there
Hmm.
is potentially a lot of glamour in it. I mean, I think personally it's the way for me,
Hmm.
not everyone. And And so more and more lately, what I've really enjoyed is talking about how hard it is, and in really kind of separating and weaving in the fact that, like, I like to do Spartan races, and like I'm crazy. I'm wild. I am intense. I'm passionate. Like, if you don't like doing hard stuff and if you are mentally weak, entrepreneurship is not for you. Right?
Agreed. Agreed. 100%. It is every day you think, why did I do this? And then 5 minutes later, something happens that gives you, so much confidence, like, I am amazing, I can do this. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, oh crap, why did I do this? And it is not, I mean, you have to be mentally strong, and your internal talk track has to be positive, and you have to be able to stop yourself and say, no, I signed up for this. I am going to see this through. And here's my why, and why I continue to wake up every morning and say, yep, today I'm going to keep doing this. I'm not jumping off this ride.
Mm. And here's what's interesting to me is that, I feel like I know some people in my life that it's like they're born entrepreneurs. They're the way they're I think Tony Robbins, he calls it your what is it, your not your human needs, but he talks about how people value certainty, uncertainty, significance, growth. There's a couple of other ones, and so it to me, it's interesting that how some people are wired to where they like uncertainty, and so stepping out into the entrepreneur world is more natural to them, right? It feels natural. They're okay with it. They can handle the uncertainty. One of the things that I learned about myself was that certainty was very, very high on my list, and so it's a mismatch in terms of going out into entrepreneurship because there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So, what do you feel like you've learned about yourself in terms of your natural wiring as an individual, and how you've had to shift your identity or who you are to be successful as an entrepreneur?
You and I are so similar. I am, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm a control freak. I want to control the outcome of every single scenario. So the fact that I have decided to go out on my own is crazy, because you're right, it's a misalignment, because there's nothing that you can control about this. You can't control when people are going to call on you for your services. You can't control if they decide to hire you or not. You can't control when they start negotiating on price. You can control your reaction to it and say, no, this is actually my price, but you can't control some of the things that are going to be thrown your way. And so I've had to make a lot of shifts, honestly. I have done a ton of work with just being okay with being uncomfortable. And I've had to be okay with saying to myself, the world can wait. This is not something that I have to respond to right now. Let me take a step back, because my instinct is to respond so quickly, because I want to be seen as responsive. I want to be seen as somebody that gets shit done. And for me, I'm like, I've been burned a couple times now by saying yes too soon, or accepting something that maybe didn't align with my values and regretted it. So there is a beauty in the pause, and that has been very hard for me. And I literally have to work every single day at taking a breath, taking a beat, not responding to a text immediately, not responding to an email immediately, and saying, this can wait 5 minutes, just so I have a second to process. It's not been easy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And for a long time I was that guy, and sometimes still am, but I think I think 1,600 emails in my inbox would say otherwise now. Where before it was, I would, yeah, same thing. Like, I had to respond to someone right away, or else, like, what are they gonna think about me or whatever? Just being that person
Yes.
that's always accessible. And at some point recently, I remember hearing, I think it was, is it her name Shonda Wright or something? She's like a TV producer.
Oh,
I
Shonda Rhimes.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think I saw her in an interview or a quote or something about how she said, at some point I realized that the mountain would always be there, meaning like the mountain of work, and that no matter how long or how hard I worked, it would constantly refill and pile back up. So I just learned to accept like leaving work with the mountain and being okay with it. And I was like, wow. Like you're never caught up, because once you're caught up, more stuff comes in.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's also, entrepreneurship can be a lonely road, especially when you first start out. If you're used to having a team around you that you can delegate to or you can rely on, bounce ideas around. And when it's just you have no one to delegate to. There's no one to pick up the slack when you decide to take a day off or unfortunately you don't feel well. It's always going to be there. And so you just have to say, I have to be okay with this because I can't let this run my life. I need to run it. And that is a huge mind shift that I don't think that I could have done in my 30s, to be honest with you. I think it has taken some emotional maturity for me to get to that point as well.
Mm. And so that's an interesting point is, for some people out there, they may have been thinking about the entrepreneurship for a while. Like how long was the idea of maybe doing your own thing in your head? Maybe if it wasn't planned, but just
Mhm.
like, had you thought about it for 10 years, 15 years, or was it only like the last couple years or
No, I would think it was about 5 years for me. It was just kind of always in the back of my mind. What would this look like? What would I do? And it's interesting because for a while, I always equated it to I have to have some big idea, almost like a Shark Tank thing. Like that's who entrepreneurs are. They have these, wild, crazy ideas that get produced and then they go to the masses. Where it's like, no, you can own your own business. You can be a consultant. You can be a franchisee. There are many ways, many paths to entrepreneurship. And so I also had to shift that mindset too, because for a while I was like, oh, I don't have any good ideas. I don't have any, scrub daddies or squatty potties that are, are out there for, for mass consumption. So I think that probably 5 years I was thinking about it, but in a different way.
yeah, interesting. And time, I mean, timing is important, right? It like the timing,
Mhm.
that phrase, like when the student is ready, the teacher will come. But there is a moment where like you have to jump. You can only stand at the cliff for so long, right? And
Right.
a quote that I love, or just a phrase, is that the way to guarantee that your parachute will not open is not jumping. It's not jumping,
I
right? Like
love
if you
that.
stand at the edge of the cliff, it cannot open.
Right. My favorite and my iteration of that is jump and the net shall appear.
Mm,
And so what I felt like as I was like, I'm just going to have to do this. And there's there's always going to be a million things that are going to tell you why you can't. I was like, oh, I don't have a website yet, or I don't have a name for my business. And my career coach said that's procrastinating. She's like, just go out there. People know who you are. You've got a
mm.
great network. People will want to hire you. Come up with a name later. Come up with a website later. And so I have really been helping people that now come to me for advice and say the same thing. I'm like, you just have to go. People will hire you. And then later on, you can say, oh, the name of my company is X. Now, for a franchisee, that's great that you can buy into a system. It's just now thinking, okay, I'm going to make the leap and go into one. And which one am I going to pick?
Yeah. And then yeah, they'll get so caught up in the, overthinking this one, this one, this one, this one. It's like just choose one. Just choose
Yes,
one. Pick one.
right. I find that asking is also a form of overthinking. So as an entrepreneur, I keep my circle pretty close of people that I ask advice from. Because the more people you start to ask advice from, you're delaying that activity, you're delaying
Mm.
the jump because you're now seeking all of this input and then you're listening to what everybody says. And at the end of the day, are you really going to take their advice? And why are you asking 10 people that are probably going to give you 10 different reasons to then make you think about, okay, well, yeah, now they brought that up. Maybe I shouldn't do this. And so I just feel like asking is a form of overthinking. Keep your circle tight who you're going to ask for opinions on, and then you need to move.
Yeah. So what was that moment for you? How did you know it was time to move?
I was honestly physically ill from the stress of my environment, and I knew that this is not how I wanted to continue living my life. And I had gone through some personal things too, and I was like, I've had enough stress for one person to handle for the next couple of years. It's time to take control. and live a life that I want to live. And back to the reality of it too, I thought entrepreneurship was going to be I set my own hours and I'm going to have all of this freedom to do what I want. In reality, I am working just as hard, if not harder, but I'm excited about it. I'm not upset about the hours I'm working because I feel passionate. I believe in what I'm doing and it's fulfilling for me.
Mm,
And so I just have a different perspective and my freedom is different. Yes, I can say I don't take meetings on Fridays, but those are my days to think and work on my business and work in it and instead of working in it, excuse me, and just really have some time to think. And so that's a freedom that I didn't have before because you're just always in meetings and things like that and answering to somebody or somebody's coming into your office. And so now I have a different kind of freedom.
mm. Yeah, and it could be so easy to still get stuck on the whole working in the business, which a lot of entrepreneurs do get stuck with because they
Mm-hmm.
don't do things like that. So, just to kind of pivot a little bit from your story, or kind of the natural next step, which is, so like, what do you do for franchisors? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of my background is in brand development. And so I had the amazing opportunity to launch a franchisor from scratch with an incredibly talented team. And so I really love getting into what is our mission, purpose, values, how are we going to go to market? And then once we get all of that established, I also have a background in performance marketing. So helping the franchisees understand at the local level what they should be doing to attract business. And then some of my engagements also are on the franchisor business development side. So helping franchisors attract new franchisees. So, how are we finding them? I mean, there are thousands of concepts out there. How are we going to differentiate ourselves? So, what story are we going to tell? What are our values that we know are going to align with the right type of candidates? And how do we set ourselves apart? And it's a challenge, like I said, with all of those concepts out there and everyone's saying the same thing essentially with we have a turnkey marketing program or we have business coaches that give you 24/7 support. Everyone says the same thing. How are
Mm,
we going to be different? And so that's something that I really like to dive into with my clients and get to the authenticity of their brand, their values, and knowing if we go out to the market with that, we're going to attract the people that want that versus just somebody that's looking to check a box.
yeah, that's interesting. So, what do you see that for some? Do you find that some of that sometimes people may be resistant to the advice maybe you give?
hmm Absolutely. There's this whole, and I've really started to go down a rabbit hole on LinkedIn and different articles reading about brand marketing versus performance marketing. And the resistance I get from either CEOs I've worked for or now that are have hired me is that they don't understand the importance of building the brand and how that affects performance marketing. And a lot of companies have their teams siloed or their budgets siloed because the performance marketing is where you can really start to say, okay, I'm getting a return on my investment. So they hone in on that and say, I didn't get X amount of leads for this amount of money that I spent. What went wrong? When as we should be looking at the whole thing saying, how are we going out to the market from a brand perspective that's going to aid in that performance marketing so that we can make it easier, make our dollars go further on the performance side. And I just hate that it's now become this either or where it should be a both and. These two parts of your marketing team should work together to drive that. And it's just sometimes hard to prove the ROI on brands. And when I say things like, what are your values? And let's be authentic, they just kind of roll their eyes because it feels too touchy feely. When in reality, it does assist in that, helping people make decisions because people make decisions based on emotions. How did that brand make you feel?
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, it is very interesting. Um, when I established the core values for our company, like one of them is, having a sense of urgency. And one of the things that I tell my team is to ask for forgiveness and not permission. And so sometimes they'll come to me, hey, what do you think? Like, you make the decision. Like, if it's the wrong one, we'll deal with it. But I'd rather that you go out on a limb and make a decision as opposed to, waiting for me for 3 days, because many Slack messages get stacked up just like my emails do.
Mm.
I'm not as accessible as I used to make myself. And so, yeah, I just think talking about those things are just really, really interesting. So how can, you know, okay, that's at the brand level, but what happens is franchisees are then these business owners that are an extension of the brand. So, like, how I guess, how can franchisees then really almost create like their own micro brand in their community that is an extension of the brand of the franchisor? And do
Mhm.
they even have that ability to do that?
Yeah, I think that is something that I experience firsthand with a lot of the franchisees. They come into the system thinking, I have bought into this turnkey marketing program and everything is going to be done for me. And I'm going to get all of the assets and I'm going to be told exactly where to place them. And that is true to an extent. So you do have that advantage. That's one of the beauties of being a franchisee, but I would coach the franchisees to also say, you are the face of this brand in Chicago, Illinois. So you need to be out there networking, talking with people. People buy from people. So if you're a service brand, make sure that people know who you are, that you're a friendly face, that you are good on your word. That's only going to take you so much further. So let the franchisor do the big heavy lifting with a national brand campaign and putting some dollars in the market. But you have boots on the ground. You know what the market is like in Chicago. I don't live there. And so you know where to go to find individuals, to network. And so that's something I really want to impress upon the franchisees is there's still a responsibility to build that micro brand in your market that falls on your shoulders. And we as a franchisor can provide you the tools that you need, but we also need you to carry the water in your communities as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people can make is going with the franchise brand because they think that they can make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And they wind up getting excited. They see the item 19, it looks, real exciting, but they really don't have any sort of real interest outside of, oh wow, I think I can make a lot of money with this. And then, you buy into something that's just not, it doesn't align, it's not
Mm-hmm.
authentic to you. And then it becomes very hard for you to be an extension of that brand because you don't really care. It doesn't really mean much to you. You're
Right.
forcing it.
Well, and those are the questions you should be asking during validation calls or during the discovery day is how much, like, be realistic with me. How much time every week do I need to spend doing XYZ? So from a marketing perspective, how much, ask the marketing director or the CMO, how many hours a week do I need to be out in the community doing things? Like start to get an idea of how much time it's truly going to take. Because to your point, they see it as an opportunity to make money and don't realize that there's a lot of work that still needs to go into it. You have a great system. There's operations behind you. There's marketing behind you. There's a lot of things behind you, but you still have to make that work because at the franchisor level, they don't have the boots on the ground in the markets. So that's really important. And asking the validators too, just tell me what an ideal, or excuse me, a typical day looks like for you. How many hours are you spending doing paperwork? What's your biggest challenge? Is it payroll? Is it hiring? Is it the marketing piece? Really start to dig in. And like I said earlier, ask them, would you be your own customer? Now that you've been in the system for 2, 3 years, however long, would you even be your own customer?
Mm.
And see what they say.
That's such a good question. You have me thinking now on that question. I'm going to go back and look at some of our stuff. Like, would I be our own
Hmm.
customer? I'm like,
Yeah.
I've never asked myself that question. And I claim that I am the avatar to who we target.
Hmm.
So I'm like, huh, well, would I be our own customer? Interesting.
Right. Right. So, and then you look through that lens at every touch point. So when I get your emails, sit there and think, okay, I got this email. Is this speaking to me? Would I be my own? Would I act on this one? Or, even like I said, if you're vetting a service brand, no matter what the industry is, or if it's a QSR brand, go into that location and see how they greet you. See what happens when you get your receipt. See if you get any sort of survey afterwards. Look at all of those touch points, because that's what you're going to be asked as a franchisee to implement in your market. And do you believe in those things? And are you in alignment with how they're talking and treating people?
Mm, super good point. Or else then you have the people that come in trying to change the system, and then, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why didn't it work? Well, you didn't follow the system. You got to follow the
Right.
system. So
Right.
make sure the system is like what
What you
will work for
want.
you. Yeah.
Exactly. So ask those. There's a lot of due diligence which I admire and I advocate for, looking through the FDD, looking through your FA. There's a lot of due diligence spent there, but are you spending as much time evaluating the process and the system you're buying into? And tell me exactly what I'm going to have to follow. And if there starts to be, places that you don't necessarily agree with, listen to those things too, because there are plenty of concepts out there that you're going to find that will align with what you believe in and what aligns with your values.
Mm, I love it. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on. We're going to drop your links in the description, but if people want to follow your journey and your growth, where's the best place to do that?
I am the most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Brooke Janasek on LinkedIn. And then I also have a blog called brookeonthegrow.com, which is just documenting all of my personal and professional growth journeys and some brand insights as well.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.